All right. Thank you very much for, this is our last conversation. I already feel a bit nostalgic almost. Thank you, Sarajevo Film Festival and Documentary Campus for this opportunity. I am just seeing the door open, as I say. If this was live, I will be seeing the people coming through, but I see the names coming through. And while they are coming through, the panel is still in preparation to launch. So thank you very much for joining. I will wait for a few seconds until we officially start. Come in. We have a really exciting panel to share, our last one. And for the next hour, we will be talking about film criticism. And the conversation will go around the question if film critics are needed in this new media age. What is the problem of film criticism these days? Has criticism become more democratic? Who can speak about films and in what way? What is the traditional authority to speak about films and be heard in public? What happens to the different participants who work in the industry and when they have their films exposed to criticism, or the festivals or the critics themselves? Thank you, welcome. I can still see people coming in. So just a few more minutes. All right. Okay, so we are going to launch. This panel is going to be recorded and then it's going to be watched live. And yes, there's a bit of a final note from Orlando saying that we can ask questions and put the questions in the chat or in the Q&A button box. So I will be reading them from there. Likely we'll read the questions at the very end. We will leave around 15 minutes before the panel ends, exactly in an hour, for your questions. So thank you, and thank you to the panelists who are here. I am surrounded by a fabulous panel of people I really admire and respect and like to exchange more ideas with. All of them I have either heard of what they do or seen what they do or shared what they do. So I'm really delighted to have them here today. Thank you all. Heleen is a festival director and also a producer. Dina is a film and festival historian. Aashna is a programmer. Uzma is a producer and a board member of Channel 4 in the UK. And of course, Pedro is a film critic and a curator. So thank you all for being here. My first question, where we kickstart the panel in a way with the actual title of the panel. So I would say, Pedro, as a film critic, are film critics needed?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Paula, for the invitation. Thank you to the Sarajevo Film Festival and to Documentary Campus. I'm very happy to be here and to answer such a, or at least to try to answer such a complicated question. And perhaps trying to defend my area of work and try to defend the work of film critics, I believe in short, yes, film critics are necessary or film critics are important, but that is not to say that we shouldn't question or we shouldn't problematize that importance. You know, I believe that film critics, personally, I've always believed that the role of a film review and ultimately the role of a film critic is not to only ascribe value to a film or to a movie. It goes way beyond the practice of saying what is good or what is bad. I think that the days when a single film critic or a single review could make or break the success of a film. And I also don't believe that our current media landscape allows for such a concentration of power. But that is not to say that film critics don't have a role in generating conversations about particular films, particular directors. but that is vastly different than that is vastly different from that antiquated notion of a film critic as holding a place of authority and power and saying what is good, what is bad, and what is important, and what should be seen or not. Film critics create conversations, they create buzz, they can provide and elaborate reflections upon films. And that is incredibly important for the economy of cinema, for the economy of festival, and for the whole ecosystem of the circulation of cinema. And I believe that that is even more important in our digital film circulation landscape, as it is increasingly hard to discover new directors, discover new propositions, discover new titles, and to be able to present or to elaborate a reflection, a consideration about particular works. I believe it helps audiences to find different films as well.
Thank you. When you were saying whether a film critic can make or break a film and it can discover directors, I couldn't stop thinking, isn't that the role of the producer? Isn't that the role of a film programmer? Uzma, I would like to bring you on. What do you think of what Pedro was saying? Do you really think that film criticism cannot affect a film in the market, or what is your take on this?
Yeah, it's I have a bit of a schizophrenic view, because the academic and literary part of me really enjoys reading detailed film criticism and finds it very interesting, and as a cinephile loves to read those things from critics around the world. Of course, as an independent film producer, critical reviews are a very crucial part of how your film is perceived in the market. And as Pedro mentioned, there's an economic ecosystem that we've created in this industry that, for good or for ill, very much relies on at the moment, quite a small cabal of people ascribing value to your film. And those people, perhaps through film festivals, have access to different types of films that the market has not yet seen. And the market relies quite heavily on those 4 or 5 or 2-star reviews when you're trying to sell a film. In fact, I was having a conversation with a sales agent this morning, and it's interesting. We obviously, I'm trying to sell a movie at the moment that I've just finished producing, an Asif Kapadia movie. We were talking about how critical those reviews are going to be in ascribing value, perceived value, to a film. So yes, in answer to the question, are they needed? At the moment, absolutely yes. We've made them a crucial part of the industry. Do I entirely agree with that? Do I think it's a little bit antiquated? I do feel it's a little bit antiquated, but like so many systems that we've set up in film, in particular independent film, for how to sell or how to connect with audiences, we haven't really examined truly and moved with the times. So I guess that's what I would be interested in hearing from others on the panel, and maybe questions from the audience as well. How do we become less reliant on a very small group of people, since it seems that small group of people is not changing anytime soon?
Thank you. Dina, you are a historian, so therefore all this sort of timeline that both Pedro and Uzma are bringing to the conversation is very relevant to the studies that you dedicate your life to. How do you see this evolution or lack of it? Do you What is the problem that we are kind of tapping around here, if you see any?
So I'm not only a historian, but I'm probably also the oldest among us. I go in my memories quite a long time ago when, for example, I was living in Chicago 25 years ago, and every week we were rushing to get the Chicago Reader with the new Jonathan Rosenbaum lengthy piece, kind of like, no such things exist anymore. And I can give many examples. I'm also privileged to be friends with some of the critics of generation that's quickly disappearing. So I personally think great of critics, and clearly my answer would be yes, critics are needed, but the context has changed tremendously. And it is really not possible to have film criticism as we know it from the times of Pauline Kael, for example, and this power broker figure and so on. So what I wanted to say is that one thing which I see, kind of also thinking of some of the discussions which you had here at Sarajevo about streamers, kind of everybody talks about this was sold to Netflix, this was sold to Amazon, these kind of things. We live in unprecedented situation of abundance. The viewing context, kind of I have never had so many films thrown at me as I have had since COVID began. This festival is online, that festival is online, this platform, this archive is open, kind of and because I'm omnivorous in my viewing desires, kind of it's really absolutely overwhelming. For me, it's pleasurable also, but also what I see more and more in terms of writing that I encounter, and I encounter it mainly online, as most of you I imagine, is that actually film criticism is turning into some sort of navigation function. We have got so much out there that we have to help you navigate it. But navigation, very rarely I see something that is satisfactory. Very often it is about 10 great Indian films that you didn't know were on Netflix. Or these Chinese pleasures are kind of I like watching Indian movies, I like watching Chinese films, I'm not saying this in any sarcastic way. But it is kind of always it is reduced to some sort of paragraph. This is not film criticism as far as I'm concerned. It is helping me to navigate, which is good. So what I want, however, it's not satisfactory. What I want is film critics that are hopefully independent, if we come back to this, I will say more, and knowledgeable. These are the two things. At the moment, the prevailing context in which I see kind of especially new generation of critics, because some of the oldest ones have created some sort of oasis for themselves online somewhere. So you can go and you can find the whole oeuvre from Jonathan Rosenbaum, for example, or my friend Jean-Michel Frodon writes every week 3-4 times for Slate in France, some of the most exquisite criticism and so. So these people still continue functioning, but this is not really what we are showered with. And the new critics, I often doubt their independence, and I often have serious doubts also about their knowledge, because we have an enormous amount of material. You need to know a lot in order to help others navigate the abundance.
Thank you, Dina. When Dina was speaking, Aashna, I was thinking, well, what I'm being offered is either a curator's idea of a film critic or a very non-diverse. I mean, as much respect that I have for Jean-Michel Frodon and all those traditional critics, they tend to be cahiers du cinéma, old school of critics. How does a curator feel about, because in a way, this 10 films you haven't seen is taking a space of a curator type. And on the other side, we are not being offered diversity on the ideas on criticism. And I know that you worked around both ideas, actually. Would love your point of view.
Yeah, I thought it was, I loved what Pedro said about the concentration of power. I think that's something I definitely think about. personally, as I go into programming, I'm thinking about like the audience, and I'm thinking about the masses viewing, and I'm not thinking about like people in our industry watching, because we are, as a programmer, I also tend to work in a lot of community spaces, and I want to cater to the people who are going to be there and who are going to be attending. And so in that case, I personally don't read like long form film criticisms. I tend to go to social media, honestly. And I think with the kind of abundance and kind of like the listicles and stuff that Dina mentioned, like I think while it can be overwhelming and it feels like it's kind of stepping on our toes a little bit, it also feels like it has opened up our space to the masses, and that's who it's really for. Personally, I really love watching film review, like film essays on YouTube, or like I think like Twitter is such a fun like space also to get people's opinions on certain films, and I know not everybody like loves that. Like social media is also very overwhelming and can be filled with a lot of junk as well, but I think when I am programming for people, I want to hear from the people, and I kind of need to put aside my own kind of my own biases or kind of perspective from someone in the film industry. Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yes, you have. And Heleen, you are both a festival director and a producer. So how do you view the landscape that you're offered in your roles, in both your roles, in terms of film criticism? Do you think it helps your work on as a programmer, as a festival director, and it doesn't as a producer, or vice versa, or it helps it in both ways? How would you describe that?
Well, I think that we are all part of a film ecosystem, aren't we? Like critics are part of a discourse. There should be discourse. I think that's the main, for me, that's the key word, actually, whether it's an intellectual discourse or like Aashna mentioned, reaching the people, reaching your audiences. It's all part of a whole. And to find the role of film criticism in there, I think that's very challenging, but I do think it's an essential role. And personally, I'm much less interested in the market-driven kind of criticism of trade magazines. I would also say that kind of reviewing, that kind of film criticism is maybe a little, is definitely outdated. Also the people that write there, and this very market-driven look on films as entertainment and products. I mean, if we want film to be taken seriously as an art form, as like the seventh art form, I think we need vital discourses, we need vital criticism, and we need people with different points of view that not only represent different groups in our societies globally, but also different film languages. So I think we need more openness in criticism. And actually that partly is, it's really a niche thing. And what you can do as a festival is, for instance, I mean, we all know that a lot of film critics nowadays are not paid anymore for their work, but we have a budget, and many other festivals do as well, to invite targeted critics that we find interesting. And these can also be young bloggers or people that have started their own new outlets. It can be blogs, it can be a new magazine, and there's actually a lot going on. It's just not mainstream. So for instance, there's in Russia, there's one feminist film criticism blog, and it gets a lot of shit storms from everywhere. It's attacked constantly. This is something I find it interesting to invite a person like that, and she might not agree with my programming. She might even criticize it very harshly, but I think that's challenging, and that's also something that that festivals should invite. So I realize this is very far from the market and from my point of view as a producer. But on the other hand, I firmly believe in film as an art form. So I want criticism to be diverse and challenging.
And Uzma, while Heleen was talking, I see you, Dina. I'm coming to you afterwards for sure. When Heleen was talking, I saw you nodding about critics and the market. Is there something that you would like to add to that part of the conversation, and how trades, how type of criticism we get in the trades as a different thing from like a cinephile type of criticism that you mentioned that you enjoyed?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's sometimes quite an uneasy balance as well, because inevitably what happens is that you have this dictatorship of taste. You know, it exists in so many areas of our industry. And, you know, when Aashna was talking about going to social media, and I think it's really important for us to, yes, respect cinema as an art form, but also in order for it to thrive and survive, we've got to have younger people interested in it, and in whichever language they speak and however they want to consume. We should, I think we need to get over ourselves a little bit as well, because for a young person, those YouTube reviews, which I think everyone should go and watch because they're actually really fun, those YouTube reviews are what they trust. That's a language they understand. So I think, are we able as an industry to create a space where all of those things can exist and have equal footing? I'm not sure. We're definitely, we haven't demonstrated that yet. I wish we could. But what ends up happening is, on the industry side, because it is so homogenous in the way it views art or film with a capital A, capital F, cinema with a capital C, it's unfortunate that so many films just don't get a look in. And you see that in the huge differences between where audiences are going and what audiences are excited by, and what the industry is just talking to, sort of like this, talking to each other like this.
Thank you. Dina, you wanted to react to what Helena was saying.
Yes, and also in a way continue what Uzma is saying. I will give concrete examples. One thing is that just this morning I received an email from, I'm on the mailing list of FIPRC, that FIPRC has, which is the World Organization of Film Critics, often with juries at many festivals, including Sarajevo, I believe, of their Grand Prix. So like, you know, they have a Grand Prix which they award, like, you know, after distilling the critical opinion of the world, because they're also the most multicultural organization. And guess which film won the Grand Prix of FIPRC? Nomadland. Of course, somehow all the critics from all over the world reached this very amazing consensus in a context where we have about 5,000 new films, and where the film, where the award was not awarded last year. For last time, Grand Prix of FIPRC was given in 2019. I went to check then to see which film got this award. Guess which one? Roma, with the second one running is Parasite. So kind of like, you know, if I have to shape my opinion on the basis of these awards given, and this year the 5 films in the running were again the usual suspects, I don't exactly know what I think about, like, you know, this constellation of people who call themselves a professional film critic, and how this all operates. Perhaps some colleagues will explain. But as I happen to be a Balkan film historian, and like, you know, Sarajevo Film Festival is very relevant to me, I do believe that actually critics still have huge influence and very great importance. And a lot has to be done by producers, by distributors, and by festival people to actually boost the critical coverage of important films in order to improve their chances. A film that didn't have a good coverage this year and should have had is the amazing Jasmila Žbanić film, Quo Vadis Aida, which was absolutely shattering film of the greatest massacre that has happened in recent history, which actually never got proper coverage by critics. Critics are in great debt to this film. And it was shortlisted for an Oscar for foreign film. And like, to see it lose to a film like Another Round, which by Thomas Vinterberg, which is very conservative and exactly everything that you expect of this film. It is enjoyable. I'm a fan of Mads Mikkelsen specifically. So the film ticks all the boxes. Just one more Thomas Vinterberg film, entirely on the riding on the back of amazing film criticism, which lauded it. At the same time, this female film by Aashna Spanish was kind of put into oblivion. I'm not going to bring in the gender dimension, which I have plenty to say about as well. So I can give many more examples, but as I see,
absolutely. No, but I think of course Heleen wanted to react. Heleen wanted to react because of course you're saying producers need to be doing more, festivals need to be doing, and actually. And Pedro, then it's going to be your turn to react. Of course, I am thinking, what can producers or festivals or curators do? Heleen and Aashna, if you can react to that, and then I want to go to Pedro.
Well, my experience as both as a producer and a festival programmer is unfortunately that most journalists, even prominent ones, just hit the copy paste key and take your press release or your press kit. Or the exact opposite. If you're promoting a film, everyone wants, that's in a prominent festival, everyone wants an interview with the director and asks the same questions basically. And the director usually isn't being paid for this. So he has he or she has 2 months of extra work just doing press junkets, answering the same questions over and over and over again. Yes, more can be done. I think maybe if producers and distributors would make more of a stance, and especially now that we've all discovered that Zoom is also an option, maybe these promotional tours that also take a lot of time where people are not paid for could also be reduced. Just some ideas here. Yeah, so I think, of course, people can do more to promote their individual films, but there's so much out there. The answer could be curation. The answer should be probably that we, again, start working more local, even though we stream, but say what you will about art house cinemas. A lot of them are now threatened, but the best ones do know their audiences. They do know what's going on in the neighborhood, and they also try to look for new target groups in the neighborhood. So that's, I think, in terms of, but that's not really press, is it now? It's PR. And that's also another thing, like Dina, you mentioned the independence of film critics, and you doubt that very much. And I agree that a lot of the work has sort of turned into PR. And yeah, I don't think anyone is waiting for that.
Aashna, if I could ask you to react to that, and I want to go to Pedro on this overall, because a lot of the film critic has come to the center now.
You mind actually repeating your original question?
My original question was a reaction to the comments from our colleagues here, because Dina was talking about the fact that film curators or actually producers and festivals could do more. And then, of course, Heleen talked about the curator. So can we do more? Can we do anything from our positions to make this ecosystem healthier? Maybe is the question.
Yeah. Again, like coming from a very like community-based programming perspective, like I think when I'm looking, you know, I am looking for films that I can help boost in my festival programming, and whether not just through programming, but can I invite them to, you know, do panels and Q&As and talkbacks? Can I help them get press for their film? Like it's yeah, I try to think about more than just like programming, but also like allowing them to have a platform to speak, and, you know, can I kind of give them other opportunities through this one festival, and of course, you know, keep them in mind for other opportunities wherever I can, like, you know, suggest them to other things. But yeah, I think that's, yeah, from a programmer's perspective, like, yeah, I think creating a healthier kind of ecosystem of, you know, getting the films that are not just like the big kind of like blockbuster films. But then again, I think, you know, specifically at the festival I work right now, the Regent Park Film Festival in Toronto, we are a free festival that's all about accessibility. So at the same time, while I'm thinking about like, what are the films that people aren't necessarily thinking about that I can program, I'm also kind of thinking about like, you know, where can I bring the films that people are really excited about, and, you know, provide it for free and give them a space to feel included in the film landscape where they might not otherwise be able to see these very highly sought out films in the festival world.
So if I am reading right, what you were saying is in your space, which is clearly something that has more to do with the future than what we've been doing so far about accessibility and integration, the film critic doesn't really have a space in that ecosystem. You're not reading the critics to decide all these things. You're looking at your audiences, you're looking at your communities. This is what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that film critics are not necessary. I wouldn't say that, you know, they should disappear, but I think also, I think film critics can be important for those filmmakers who maybe aren't getting enough, you know, press and like discussion around their films too. You know, I was a part of a critics like program with the Toronto-based festival called Relation International Film Festival, where, you know, a bunch of us got to, you know, watch all the films at the festival and then choose a few films to write critiques about. And I think that was really great because we got to choose the, you know, like short, not just features, but like shorts that we could, you know, help promote those filmmakers who are just kind of starting out in their career as well. Mm-hmm. And also we were, you know, all of us for this specific program were all, you know, Asian, East Asian, South Asian, like we were all of Asian diaspora. And yeah, so I think like something like that, I think when festivals and, you know, other organizations create opportunities like that, you know, not only give me an opportunity to talk about film in another way than I usually do with, you know, with my normal festival work, but also give me an opportunity to hype up some other filmmakers and, you know, what they're doing. So yeah, I don't think that the role of film critics is, you know, unnecessary. I think it's maybe just changing, and I think there's a lot of space for, you know, variety and more diversity with all the different platforms we have available.
Yeah. I want to make a note for later, or for whatever time we have later, about cultural specificity and cultural knowledge, because that's also what I'm hearing from what you just said. But I would like to give Pedro a chance to react to this idea of film independence, critics' independence, and also to this landscape that seems to confuse or to show us that there is a lot of PR, and film criticism sometimes is not as relevant as we would like when it comes to mainstream.
I would like to jump in on what you mentioned about cultural specificity, because I was thinking about whenever a film critic or perhaps a film programmer is analyzing a film for either be publishing a review or evaluating if the film belongs in the festival program or an event or in a retrospective. Whenever the professional is doing the work of analyzing a film, you're articulating a repertoire, and that repertoire can often go unchallenged. And it can often only reflect or reflect an established notion of what cinema is, or what the established film curriculum in film schools is. And I think that, like also Aashna was saying, that the film the film critic role is changing. The landscape, the media landscape for film critics is changing. And there are a lot of different voices writing about film and that are articulating immensely varied and diverse repertoire in order to write about film, in order to write reviews, in order to program festivals, and to challenge that, what is, or to challenge those notions of an established repertoire. It is incredibly important, not only for the future of film criticism, but for the circulation of cinema as a whole. But I think, and now going back to your question about film critic independence, I think that is perhaps the key point of contention, because there are a lot of voices, there are a lot of independent voices, but they just don't have the same space, the same platform as established, mainly white, mainly male, mainly European film critics in major news outlets. And how to promote those voices, how to make those reviews read, how to help connect perhaps cinephiles, festival goers with those reviews, with those reflections that are writing, of people that are writing based on a plurality of different experiences, not only of an established film curriculum. I think that is incredibly important, and that is something that everyone in the industry can do. I think that festivals, a lot of different festivals have film writing programs, film writing workshops, and that is a way to promote new voices, younger voices, but also diverse voices.
Thank you. Yeah, Uzma, I wanted to go with you because, yes, you want to react to this, and then I'll give you the question I had.
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to jump in because I think it's a really, really important point, and Dina's example is such a perfect one. And we can think of many, many other examples like it. But I think it's also important to realize that this incredible wealth of talent, I was very excited to hear that Sarajevo has a young critics program as well. This incredible wealth of talent that we have bubbling under, people from different backgrounds, younger people, et cetera, it's not that there's no fault with them that they're not able to get these platforms. It's very much a protectionist system that keeps incumbent, homogenous critics in particular in place in their, ivory towers. That's not something that happens by accident. That happens because people aren't hiring younger people and are very specifically wanting to keep a certain homogeneity. So I think it's really important for us, especially people working on the grassroots, and it's very exciting what Aashna is doing, to be aware of that and not internalize that we're doing something wrong. Because what would be very sad is if these young people get to a certain level and are just blocked from progressing. So we have to really call out those ceilings wherever they are, and make sure that they're we don't allow, as an industry and as a community of filmmakers and film lovers, for that to continue, because I think it's affecting us all.
Super important. And I think that the key there is the idea of internalizing how the system works and not being able to really challenge how the system works, when, especially for those of us making films that are not culturally specific to what is considered the canon, let's say, permanently for the canon of entertainment, either, because even entertainment has a canon, not outside art house, not only in the art house. I think you can find that, and of course the mainstream films and all. Heleen, I can see you wanted to jump in on that. Yes, please.
Well, you mentioned entertainment. I actually think entertainment is much more open in terms of diversity and what is happening there in the world of series and platforms. It's actually much faster in reacting to certain developments in our societies. But Uzma, you mentioned the world progressing, and I was wondering, progressing towards what? Like, what is the gold standard? Is it like being accredited in Cannes and actually getting tickets, or is it becoming part of the structures that have been established again by the same like hierarchy that we are seeing? Is it maybe, aren't we living in a world that's much more diversified already, and can't we make our own structures? I mean, this sounds very naive, but I know that a lot of people are already doing it. They're not oriented towards Cannes or Cahiers du Cinéma or the trade magazines. And for them, there are totally different standards. And this is still marginal, but living in continental Europe, this is actually something that people can do, and they even get subsidy for it and can make careers out of it. So,
yeah, I think that's important, and we will always, those of us on the margins will always do that, and we'll always be creating our own structures because we absolutely have to. But I also don't want these institutions to die, and they will unless they change.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But like a Cahiers du Cinéma invites like guest writers from Romania, from like countries that maybe on the margin of Europe, but that do have an interesting criticism discourse. They do it slowly, but there is a little bit. And sometimes even women are allowed to write.
So, oh my God, that's good. I wanted to say, I would like to see the questions. If you have any questions in the audience, please do put them in the Q&A or in the chat box. Dina, I know you want to react, and I think it's super pertinent because you have this this large umbrella that you were sharing before. Please.
Another example I was thinking about this week was that I had 3 weekend newspapers here in Britain: Financial Times, The Telegraph, and The Times. And if I had more, probably it would be the same picture. A film that was uniformly reviewed and praised, and if I wanted to read plenty of criticism, is something called 9 Lives. With Nicole Kidman. I had not heard such thing exist. So every critic had felt the necessity to write. It is on Amazon Prime. So I went on Amazon Prime because when I get strong recommendation like this, to discover that this film is actually not even out yet. So once again, this weekend, when actually most on television was coming this horrible situation in Afghanistan, once again, I had this kind of feeling of anger on this complicit film criticism. This is not film criticism as far as I'm concerned. This is the PR aspect of film criticism. Film criticism, it will be when I see the situation in Afghanistan evolving as it evolves, and a film critic thinking to write about A Flickering Truth by Pieter Brett Kelly, for example, the amazing documentary about film archivists who are trying to keep alive a completely different memory of Afghanistan, a film that very few people have seen, amazing. Why don't we have a film critic to write about this rather than praise a film that Amazon will release with or without them, and a film that will be beaten all over my head, and definitely there is no escape to see it anyhow. Why doesn't any critic write about the films of Sarah Karimi, the Afghani female filmmaker, who I really don't know what is going to happen with her? She had sent out a desperate letter and so on.
I think she was evacuated by Turkish Airlines, to be honest. I think she's in safety.
This is good. I didn't know. This is great. So I want to see film criticism that really responds to what is happening, as opposed to just checking what
and helps us connect these dots as well, think them in a perspective through the cinema lens.
So it seems to me that very many of those that actually manage to monetize, because like, the issue is critics exist but have difficulty monetizing. Most of those who manage to monetize are also those that actually turn fear of criticism into a PR exercise. This is what I have come to think.
So when we see this, we have to try and find where is the moment that the bridge breaks, because I am sure that the critics who love cinema and like to write about ideas were never really thinking that what will they end up doing is giving us some maybe plot spoilers and telling us whether this film is going to sell in this or other country, or this is going to be doing well in festivals. Sometimes it does feel a bit like a glorified marketing person creating buzz or PR through these things, and all the other ideas, all the other connection of dots, which probably don't happen to someone. Pedro, you are an independent freelancer critic, and I think that this is where we need to find where is it that we're failing. Is it because the critics are being paid by the same people who are putting out the films? Is that what really creates this homogeneous space, and this is the problem? Or do we have any other problems? Are there resistances between the older generations and the newer generations doing criticism in different ways? I would like to see how we can find the reason why this is happening, and if it's not capricious at all. Or what would you like to say about this, Pedro?
I think it is important to remark that the film criticism has always been in crisis. It is an activity of being in crisis constantly, but the current shift in the profession, they do not reside outside of the shifts of the industry as a whole, of the new digital media landscape. And if we're talking about new distribution models, we're talking about new models for film festivals and for the circulation of cinema as a whole, then we should also discuss where do film critics reside on those in this new landscape. I would like to jump on what Dina was talking about, and perhaps to pile on the defense of long-form criticism. I think that film critics should go way beyond just saying what is good, what is bad, ascribing value to film. They should go beyond. To be part of a PR machine is not to write a film review, is not criticism. But especially after the fire that destroyed part of the archives of the Brazilian Cinematheque, I am a strong believer that film critics also hold an important role in preserving the memory of cinema, and preserving the memory of the event of cinema, of how was that experience? How was that first screening at a film festival? How was that launch? How was that first week, the first contact with the film that wasn't seen before? And that is something that you cannot do just by copy and pasting a press release.
Thank you. Uzma, I would love your reaction to where is it that we need to be looking at? Where is not the culprit, but how do we find a solution to this? Is there a solution to this?
Yeah, I think there's like I mentioned before, those on the margins will continue to thrive and find new ways to communicate to audiences they want to communicate to. And I don't know how one changes the establishment. I've been trying to work that out my entire life. I don't know how you do that exactly, but I would hope that I'm one of the organizations I work for. I sit on the board of Bird's Eye View, which is an incredible organization that sort of advocates for gender equality in film and uplifts and showcases films by women and with female protagonists. And I think increasingly organizations like that, the incredible success of films with diverse that are appealing to diverse audiences, eventually that you can't deny that tide. And another sort of concrete example that I found very interesting, and that was also not really spoken about very much in the UK, apart from in a relatively negative way, is a film called Blue Story. Incredibly successful homegrown movie that found its audience, did really great box office numbers, but which the critical community just did not understand. And I think there'll be more and more examples of that, and that gap will widen. I'm excited for it to widen because I'm hoping that that will instigate change. I know so many brilliant young people who are excited by film and who are going to be the custodians of our industry. And I really hope that they're going to find their way and change the makeup of this of the curation of what we see and what we see as good cinema.
Thank you. That was really great. We are 9 minutes from finishing this. We have one question from the audience saying, since the discussion is taking place in the framework of Sarajevo Film Festival and Cinelink, could you share examples you know of new critics and platforms in this region that are reinventing criticism in not traditional formats? Could be audiovisual, non-language based, etc. Thank you. So I would suggest that to some of the panelists, if you know of any, please feel free to share them in the chat or say their name now here. I'm going to ask for some other closing nuggets from the rest of you. Aashna, I would like you to give us, where do you think we should be going to solve some of the things that we mentioned here, or one last thought that you'd like to share?
Yeah, it's a big question. There are no easy answers. Yeah, I mean, as Uzma was speaking, I was just kind of thinking about you know, unfortunately to change, like to have structural changes more often than not, at least in my career and in the Toronto kind of Canadian film landscape, I've seen a lot of things kind of start from the bottom up. I think a lot of changes have to happen internally with young people a lot of the times to challenge the systems that are in place. And yeah, I don't see kind of criticism or the film industry completely like being flipped anytime soon in terms of like who are the people who have kind of the strongest voices and power. It is definitely getting better, but yeah, I think wherever we have the capacity to do so, I think trying to change things for ourselves and giving other people opportunities in the process, and bringing people along for the journey where we can. But yeah, I think it's a slow process, but I think happening. So yeah.
Thank you, Dina. I would like you to give us some closing remarks from yourself before I go to Heleen.
We still need critics. The stakeholders are too many, so obviously they have to please too many agendas, but we need them, and I'm looking forward to reading some amazing criticism soon.
Thank you very much. Heleen?
Yeah, well, I mentioned before, I'm a firm believer in discourse. So, and I know that especially a lot of people that come from marginalized communities, even if they set up their own successful structures, they suffer from imposter syndrome. something I can relate to myself, but I would say call people out, like when they write idiotic reviews that you don't agree with, or if the discourse goes in a wrong direction, and you feel that you have more to say about it, that you have certain expertise, engage in those conversations. There are so many platforms where you can make yourself heard, even if it's on social media, you know. And so I actually like that a lot of reviews nowadays are actually fiercely criticized on social media, and sometimes really discourse ensues from that. It's small steps, but I would encourage anyone that's listening today to engage in conversations with more established film critics and challenge them.
Thank you very much. Pedro, as an independent film critic that generally is also trying to find its space in this conversation, because of course, in the same way that we're talking about uplifting from the bottom up, independent film critics also want a space to be heard, to be able to spread their ideas. And it's not all about the trades or the established spaces where we see film criticism, which is what we were sort of criticizing or discussing the most here. Would you like to give a final remark?
Well, I think it is whether you're independent or an established film critic is always important to remember that a film critic is ultimately a film spectator. You're occupying a privileged position to review, analyze, and talk about a film, but you're talking about a film coming from a particular set of experiences, a particular repertoire of knowledge and of knowledge of cinema or of life or of culture as a whole. I cannot say that I hope to see more independent voices writing. I read a lot of independent critics and reviews in different languages. What I hope to see is that those voices can find some more established professional, structure environment in order to thrive. Those voices exist. They're writing reviews, and I hope that we as an industry can help them and give them a platform as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. I think I covered most of the questions. I can answer you. Oh, okay. Somebody is saying that Dina has answered directly. Thank you, Dina, if you have. So this is the last panel of the Cinelink days that I've been doing once again this year. Thank you, Dina, Pedro, Heleen, Aashna, and of course, Uzma. It's been a pleasure and honor. I believe in having all conversations. I think that in order to have a more just idea of how our film ecosystem industry can work, these are the conversations that came to mind this year. In no way they are the most extensive repertoire, just a repertoire that we were allowed to have with the limited amount of time that we all have. So, but I really enjoyed being here. Thank you once again to Documentary Campus that has allowed me to create this program with complete freedom and support. And thank you so much to Sarajevo Film Festival, to Cinelink, and to the partners of Screen International. And to all of you, thank you. And I look forward to seeing each and every one of you in direct face-to-face sometime rather sooner rather than later. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.